Hello, my name is Douglas Matthews and welcome to the second video in the Acrylics for Beginners course. I say acrylics for beginners, but in actual fact it's just as good for anyone who knows a bit about acrylics. Maybe give you some ideas that you haven't thought about. But today what I'm planning on doing is advancing the idea of the sky and going into horizon that we started off at the beginner. So just to recap, the primary colours that I'm using are lemon yellow and cadmium yellow, then cadmium red and alizarin crimson. Then we have the cool pale blue, cerulean blue, Prussian blue, which is a darker cool blue, cobalt blue, which is a warm pale blue, and ultramarine in this big container here is the darker warm blue. And then there's also white. And I mentioned before that white is something that you'll use a lot of, at least 3 times more white than any other colour. Brushes, I tend to favour fairly broad ones, filbert brushes. This one's a size 10. You can get them in different sizes. They need not be very expensive, but you don't want the hairs falling out either. So a reasonable price. As I mentioned in the first video, I did a bit of sky, so we'll start that and pop in the sky colour. So I'm using cobalt blue and indicating the sky. Paint in acrylic form dries fairly quickly. Watercolour, oddly enough, when it's wet, is darker than it dries. Acrylic, when it's wet, dries a wee bit lighter. Oils dry just exactly as you see them. So here we have some sky. I'm leaving kind of negative spaces for the white clouds at the moment. I'm going to pop this in, and as you can see, I'm merging the colours together whilst it's still fairly damp. And generally speaking, the sky should be paler at the top, and then maybe strengthen a bit more as you get down towards the bottom. Now, I want to create a horizon, and one way of doing that is, if you're a bit wary about keeping a straight line, use this masking tape, and you decide on the horizon. So this is going to be a fairly low horizon. Make sure you don't have a horizon halfway up your paper or board or canvas, whatever you happen to be using. And speaking of canvas, I mentioned earlier in the first video that if you get a dent in the canvas, if you've leaned it against a coffee table or something, don't worry about it. Reverse it, pour some hot water over it, make sure the canvas is completely soaked, and pour off the excess, and then let it dry naturally, and there's no problem any longer. You don't need to use wedges. A lot of these canvases come with wooden wedges. They're a complete waste of time. You're better just to use water and let them dry naturally. So my sky here is beginning to fill in. I'm breaking up the white clouds a little bit, like that, putting in some shadow underneath, like that. Down here, I'm going to have some darker. Generally speaking, I use a bit of music in the background if I want to paint, and it puts me in a good mood. And if you're going to do something like a sky, then something nice and strident, a good bit of good classical music works wonders. I tend to kind of conduct using my brush, and I kind of twirl it around in different directions to get texture. We're not looking for a photograph here. You're looking for something with a bit of expression. And when you're painting, that's what painting's all about. Expressing yourself, expressing your feelings, expressing your moods, your favorite subject matter, all of that. And for beginners, I think it's easier if you start off with something that can't be defined, like, for example, a bottle, apples, that kind of thing can be defined in shape. People recognize it if your apple's far too big, compared to a bottle, for example. But if you're doing a sky, well, skies change constantly, and what you're doing is creating something pleasurable for yourself. You're wanting to come away from the experience saying, oh, that was really good fun, I enjoyed doing that. And the great thing about acrylic paint is, if you muck it up, it's not a problem. You can buy one of these gesso primers and give it a coat with a 2-inch paintbrush, and you're back to square one again, okay? So all is not lost when you're using acrylics. When the paint starts to dry a little, you may find that it's easier to blend in, like that. So I'm putting in soft. I'm putting in little touches of slightly darker colour here to break up this cloud. I'm just inventing these clouds. You can be using your own photographs. I tend to take lots and lots of photographs when I'm out and about. This area that I'm working towards is a painting of East Lothian, which is to the east of Edinburgh. And East Lothian is famous for its big skies, and it's looking out towards the Kingdom of Fife, across the Firth of Forth. Right, so we've got some clouds in here. And as you can see, you're getting a sky effect without the thing being too detailed, without having to worry about drawing. We don't want you to start drawing at the moment when you're beginning in acrylics. We just want you to enjoy yourself, putting paint on, getting different paintbrush effects. It's all about enjoying yourself. Texture, creating marks, making marks. That's what it's all about. And there's some cloud coming in there. Now, what I've got is this area up here, which is the blank canvas. You could leave it blank if you wanted, or you can put in some clouds, some white. So I'll just pop in some clouds up there. Break that up, fluff it up a little bit there. So now I've got these clouds on. I want to create a bit of drama down at the bottom, which I will do in a moment, but I'm just blending these in a little bit here. If you're not too sure about composition, there are several things you can do. You can half shut your eyes, and that tends to give you the kind of overall feeling of the picture. You can turn it upside down and look at it, and whatever's wrong with it will tend to jump out at you. Or alternatively, you can hold the painting up to a mirror and look at the reflection of the painting in the mirror, and that will give you an idea of what's required. An old art tutor of mine at Glasgow School of Art said that painting is 70% observation and 30% application. In this event, because the video is quite short and I basically know what I'm doing, I'm applying a lot more. But I'm still looking at it to get the kind of general gist of things. Areas that I want maybe a little bit softer, like that. And in here, I'm going to make it a bit fluffier. And I'm going to get a big dark cloud over on the right-hand side, because that's the rain coming in from the North Sea. So here I'm going to use a bit of Prussian blue and ultramarine mixed. Get some really dark bits in here. Right down onto the horizon. And a bit more the Prussian blue. And as you can see, I haven't actually changed the brush yet. Still using the number 10. Okay. So that is the beginning of it. And then I'm going to work into that. Now to darken the blue, I want to get something that approximates a kind of black. So I'm going to use some cadmium red and Prussian blue. I never use black. I never use grey. It's a personal thing because I know that I can mix up approximations of blacks and grey using Prussian blue and cadmium red. So that's going in there. Now that top half there is dry. This part here is still a bit damp. So that allows us an opportunity to blend in a wee bit more. You could move into a slightly smaller brush. Here I'm using a little bit of alizarin crimson. Pop that in like that. And then I'm going to pop in a little bit of land down at the bottom right here. The distance there. And up here, you can have a little bit of a kind of an island if you wanted. And then blend that in a bit. Soften the edge a bit there and down here, like so. So, I've got some dark areas still to put in. Again, into the Prussian blue, cadmium red, and I'm popping in some deep bits here and there. Under that cloud there. So I'm going to give that area. I'm going to get, whilst it's still damp, I'm going to lift a little bit of colour off, just using the end of the brush and then a little wipe with the paper towel. And what I'm trying to get is the effect of rain in the distance, just coming down there from that cloud. And a little bit over here, fairly dry brush. Down there, okay? And then I'm going to blend in a little bit more of this. It's looking to be a bit rough there, so I can soften that. And I'll pop in a little fluffy cloud in here that's kind of broken in. Just going to break it up a little, and then in here little touches. I'm just scraping the brush across the surface like that. And soften that wee bit up there. Little touches more white here and there. I put it on fairly thickly now. I want a really nice thick area up here to make that cloud stand out. Now I could quite easily use a palette knife for that, where you just take your colour and spread it across. Like that, so you can put it on that way, or you can use your brush. It's entirely up to you. Some people like to do a painting completely with palette knife. Personally, I'm not mad keen on it myself, but whatever you feel like, it's all about enjoying yourself. So here we are, more or less. The sky's more or less finished. I'll just soften the edge there a little bit on that. So what I can do now is take that tape off, and you see you've got a nice kind of smooth area down at the bottom. Now, what you would do there is work into that area there next for the water, but you've been focusing on the sky, and that's got to dry. Now, whilst you're looking at it, you can say to yourself, is there anything I can do to that to make it a bit more interesting? Well, maybe it'd be a good idea to balance that by putting something slightly darker up at the top. So I could add a wee bit more colour up here, and then soften the edge. I'm going to use a completely dry brush here, no paint on it. I'm just going to soften that edge, like so. And then you could maybe have a little bit of the darker colour up here, pop that in there. Soften that too. Okay, so that's the sky more or less done. So for the next lesson, we'll go on to the foreground. Okay, so just to recap, you're working with a horizon that's never in the middle, off center. Think about a bit of drama in your sky. Apply the paint as thickly or as thinly as you want. If you feel that some bits need to be softened a bit, just take a smaller brush and give it a little tickle across here. If anything's going wrong with your painting and you're getting really fed up with it, just leave it for a while. Go and have a coffee or take a wee walk or do something, read a book, and then come back to it. People like to put their painting up somewhere where they can constantly see it, and they analyse it. Personally speaking, I just put mine away and I'll look at it again the next day with fresh eyes. And if there's anything desperately wrong with it, you'll see right away. And as I said already, you can either use just white acrylic paint if you want and paint over the bits you don't like, or you can use, if you want to go really attacking your canvas again, use this primer and go over the whole thing and start again. But the great thing about this acrylic painting is that you can't go wrong with it, really, because any mistakes you make, you can paint over. Okay, thank you very much for joining us for this video, and I hope to see you in the next one.